Our tale begins in the quaint suburban home of the Johnson family. 7-year-old Emily, a bright-eyed child with a penchant for drawing, had always been creative. Her parents, Sarah and Michael, encouraged her artistic pursuits, their refrigerator a gallery of colorful scenes and stick figure families. But on a crisp autumn evening, Emily produced a drawing that would change their lives forever. It seemed innocent enough at first glance, a child's bedroom, rendered in bright colors. But there, in the corner, barely visible, was a figure, a man with an unnaturally wide smile, his eyes two empty voids. Emily insisted he was always there, watching. Sarah dismissed it as an imaginary friend, a common phase for children Emily's age. Michael, however, felt an inexplicable chill when he looked at the drawing. He couldn't shake the feeling that those empty eyes were somehow looking back at him. Days passed, and Emily's behavior began to change. She would stare at empty corners, giggling to herself. Her drawings became darker, the smiling man appearing more frequently, growing larger with each iteration. Sarah found Emily talking to herself in the middle of the night, her small voice alternating between whispers and muffled laughter. Concerned, Sarah and Michael reached out to Dr. Jameson, a renowned child psychologist. As he interviewed Emily, the young girl's demeanor shifted between shy reticence and unsettling confidence. She spoke of the smiling man as if he were an old friend, describing in vivid detail his long, spindly fingers and the way his smile seemed to split his face in two. Dr. Jameson, initially skeptical, found himself growing uneasy as the session progressed. The room seemed to grow colder, and more than once he caught movement in his peripheral vision, only to turn and find nothing there. As weeks passed, strange occurrences became commonplace in the Johnson household. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut in still air, and the constant feeling of being watched permeated every room. Sarah would wake to find Emily's crayons scattered across the floor, new drawings of the smiling man taped to the walls, though she was certain she'd put her daughter to bed hours before. The breaking point came on a moonless night in December. Sarah and Michael were awoken by a blood-curdling scream. They rushed to Emily's room, hearts pounding, to find it empty. The window stood open, curtains billowing in the winter wind. On the wall, illuminated by a flash of lightning, was a final drawing. The smiling man, now enormous, Emily's stick figure form clasped in his elongated fingers. The police searched for months, but no trace of Emily was ever found. The Johnsons' home became a macabre tourist attraction, drawing paranormal investigators and thrill seekers from across the country. Some claimed to see a small figure in the window, accompanied by a much taller, darker shape. Others reported hearing a child's laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Sarah and Michael eventually moved away, unable to bear the constant reminders of their loss, but they couldn't escape the legacy of the smiling man. Sarah swears that sometimes, late at night, she can hear Emily giggling and see a shadow in the corner of her eye, its mouth stretched in an impossible grin. Emily's room in the old Johnson house stands untouched, a shrine to a lost child. The walls are still adorned with her drawings, the smiling man watching over the empty bed. And in the corner, if you look closely, you might just see a tall, thin shadow and the glint of a smile in the darkness. As we catch our breath from the chilling tale of Emily and the smiling man, remember, sometimes the monsters in our children's imaginations are more real than we'd like to believe. But our journey into the realm of disturbing children's art is far from over. Steel yourselves, dear listeners, for our next story takes us deep into the woods, where a child's drawing brings a nightmare to life. Our second tale transports us to the small, unassuming town of Millbrook, nestled against the edge of a dense forest. It was a place where everyone knew their neighbors, where children played freely in the streets until dusk called them home. Among these children was 10-year-old Tommy Matthews, a quiet boy often lost in his own world. Tommy had always been different. While other children his age were forming friendships and joining sports teams, Tommy preferred solitude. He would spend hours staring into the woods behind his house, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. His parents, Mark and Linda, worried about his lack of social connections, but reassured themselves that he was simply a late bloomer, Everything changed on a brisk Monday morning in October. Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, had asked the class to draw their favorite place to play. As she walked around the room, admiring drawings of backyards and local park, she came to Tommy's desk. What she saw there chilled her to the bone. It was a playground, but not like any Mrs. Henderson had ever seen. The swings had chains that looked like gnarled hands, their fingers curled around rusted metal seats. The slide was a gaping mouth, its tongue forming the slippery slope. A merry-go-round spun on its own, its bars twisted into screaming faces, and the children playing. Their own faces were wrong, empty, devoid of features, save for wide, black smile. When asked about his drawing, Tommy's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm Mrs. Henderson had never seen in him before. He insisted this playground was real, just a short walk into the woods behind his house. He spoke of new friends he'd made there, children who understood him, who wanted to play with him, always. Disturbed, Mrs. Henderson called Tommy's parents. Mark and Linda were shocked by the description of the drawing. They had never seen such a playground, and Tommy had certainly never mentioned it before. Worried about their son's apparent delusions, they forbade him from going into the forest. But Tommy couldn't resist the call. That night, as his parents slept, he slipped out of his bedroom window. With nothing but his backpack and a flashlight, Tommy ventured into the dark wood, following a path only he could see. The next morning, the Matthews household awoke to emptiness. Tommy's bed was cold, the window open to the chill autumn air. A frantic search began, with the entire town of Millbrook mobilizing to find the missing boy. As hours stretched into days, hope began to fade. But on the third day of the search, a team ventured deeper into the forest than ever before. What they found in a clearing that hadn't existed the day before defied explanation. There, in a shaft of sunlight breaking through the canopy, stood a playground, exactly as Tommy had drawn it. The swings swayed gently, though there was no breeze. The slide's mouth seemed to open and close, as if breathing. The merry-go-round spun slowly, a tinny, discordant melody emanating from somewhere within its rusted frame. Officer Carlson, the first to reach the clearing, recounts his experience. "In all my years on the force, I've never seen anything like it. We could hear children laughing, playing, but there was no one there. And the equipment, it was alive somehow. I watched a swing reach out, its chain forming fingers, grasping at my deputy. As the search party watched in horror, the playground seemed to shimmer and fade, like a mirage in the desert. The laughter grew louder, more frenzied, and for a split second, they saw them, dozens of children, their faces blank, save for those wide black smiles, playing on the nightmarish equipment. And there, in the center of it all, was Tommy, his own face a mirror of his new playmates. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The clearing was empty once more, as if nothing had ever been there. But the searchers knew what they had seen. They fled the forest, their minds struggling to comprehend the impossible. In the days that followed, the town of Millbrook chained. Parents kept their children indoors, windows locked tight against the encroaching forest. The woods that had once been a place of adventure and exploration became a forbidden zone, whispered about in hushed tone. Mark and Linda Matthews were never the same. They spoke of hearing Tommy's laughter on the wind, of seeing flashes of twisted playground equipment through the trees at the edge of their property. They tried to cut down the forest, to destroy whatever dark force had taken their son, but the woods, they wouldn't let them in anymore. To this day, the woods of Millbrook remain unexplored. The town has dwindled, families moving away to escape the shadow of the forest and the memories of the children it has claimed. For those who remain, life is a constant vigil. They say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the sound of children playing, the creak of swings and the spin of the merry-go-round. Flashes of a twisted playground appear between the trees, beckoning to those who dare to look too long. Tommy's drawing hangs in the town hall, a warning to those who might venture too deep into the forest. And sometime, if you press your ear to the paper, you might just hear a whisper, "Come play with us. We're waiting for you in the playground that wasn't there." As the echoes of phantom children's laughter fade, we find ourselves questioning the very nature of reality. What power lies in the imagination of a child? Can belief alone bring nightmares into our world? Hold these questions close, dear listeners, for our final tale delves even deeper into the blurred lines between fantasy and reality. Our final journey into the realm of disturbing children's art brings us to the picturesque home of the Anderson family. John and Mary, proud parents of 5-year-old twins, Alex and Zoe, had built a life that many would envy. Their house, a beautiful Victorian restoration, stood as a testament to their success and happiness. But as we've learned, dear listeners, sometimes the most idyllic facades hide the darkest secret. It all began on a sunny Tuesday afternoon when Zoe brought home a drawing from kindergarten. The assignment had been simple: draw your family. Mary's heart swelled with pride as Zoe excitedly presented her artwork, chattering about how she'd captured Daddy's glasses and Mommy's favorite necklace. But as Mary's eyes scanned the colorful crayon figures, her smile froze. Mary Anderson describes the artwork that would change their lives forever. It was supposed to be our family portrait, the four of us, standing in front of our house. But there was a fifth figure, standing behind us, tall, impossibly thin, with long, spindly arms wrapped around all of us. Zoe said it was our other mommy. At first, John and Mary dismissed it as childhood fantasy, a product of an overactive imagination. They praised Zoe's artwork and hung it on the refrigerator, trying to ignore the unease that settled in their stomachs whenever they looked at that fifth figure. But then, strange things began to occur in their home. Objects would move on their own, always when no one was looking. Dark shapes flitted at the edge of their vision, gone when they turned to look. And the children, they started to change. John Anderson, his voice trembling, recounts, they would talk in unison, finishing each other's sentences. Sometimes I'd catch them staring at nothing, heads tilted at unnatural angle, and they kept drawing that thing over and over, on their homework, in their coloring book, even on the walls when we weren't looking. As days turned to weeks, the presence in the house grew stronger. Mary would wake to find long black hairs on her pillow, though no one in the family had black hair. John felt cold. Skeletal fingers caress his cheek in the dark of night. The twins began to speak of their other mommy constantly, describing in vivid detail her paper-white skin and the way her smile split her face like a crack in the wall. Desperate for answers, the Andersons reached out to Dr. Evelyn Ross, a parapsychologist known for her work with haunted houses and possessed objects. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the Anderson home, Dr. Ross knew this was unlike anything she had encountered before. Dr. Ross, her voice hushed, shares her experience. The energy in that house was like nothing I've encountered in my 30 years of paranormal investigation. It was hungry, oppressive, and the children, they were acting as conduit. Their innocent minds were like open doors, pulling something through from somewhere else. Dr. Ross advised the Andersons to remove all of the twins' drawings from the house, to deny this entity the power of belief and visualization. But as they went from room to room, taking down artwork, they made a chilling discovery. Every drawing, every scribbled note, now featured the tall, spindly figure. It had inserted itself into every aspect of the children's creative expression. That night, as a storm raged outside, the situation reached its terrifying climax. Mary woke to find the children's beds empty. Following the sound of giggles, she and John made their way to the attic, a space they had never shown the twins. What they found there defies explanation. Mary, her voice barely a whisper, recounts the horror. The kids were there, but not there, transparent, like ghosts. And behind them, oh God, behind them was that thing from the drawing, its arms around them, so long they wrapped around the room multiple times. It smiled at it, a smile that split its face from ear to ear, filled with teeth like needle. John continues, his words choked with emotion. There was a flash of lightning, and they were gone, all three of them. The thing in the drawing, it took our baby. In their place, it left hundreds of drawings, covering every surface of the attic, all of them showing our family portrait. But with that thing growing larger and larger, until in the final drawing, it was all that remained. In the days that followed, the police searched every inch of the Anderson house and the surrounding area, but there was no trace of Alex and Zoe. The official report cited a tragic runaway case, 2 young children lost to the storm. But those who had seen the drawings, who had felt the oppressive presence in the house, knew the truth was far more sinister. Narrator: the Anderson house stands empty now, a focal point for local ghost hunters and thrill seekers. The once pristine Victorian restoration has fallen into disrepair, its paint peeling, windows boarded up against prying eyes and restless spirits alike. But even in its abandoned state, the house seems to pulse with an unnatural energy. Local teenagers dare each other to spend the night on the property, though few make it past the rusted front gate. Those who do report strange occurrences, the sound of children's laughter echoing through empty rooms, crayon markings appearing on walls that were blank moments before, and always the feeling of being watched by something just out of sight. Paranormal investigation teams have flocked to the Anderson house, their equipment picking up unexplainable reading. EVP sessions have captured what sounds like Alex and Zoe's voices, calling out for their parents, interspersed with a deeper, guttural sound that makes even the most hardened investigators feel ill at ease. Dr. Ross, who has continued to study the case, shares her latest finding. The entity that manifested through the children's drawings seems to feed on belief and fear. The more attention it receives, the stronger it grows. I've documented similar cases across the country, children's artwork bringing forth malevolent entities, but never have I seen one so powerful, so hungry. As word of the Anderson case spread, other families came forward with their own stories of disturbing children's drawing. A pattern emerged, always a figure in the background, growing larger and more defined with each new picture, always a child insisting on the presence of another parent or friend. John and Mary Anderson, unable to let go of hope, have dedicated their lives to searching for their children. They've traveled the country, following leads and investigating similar cases. In each town they visit, they leave behind Zoe's original family portrait drawing, hoping it might somehow lead them back to the twin, but their quest has come at a terrible price. Mary speaks of night terror, of feeling long, spindly fingers caressing her face in the dark. John has become a shell of his former self, his eyes constantly darting to the corners of rooms, searching for a too wide smile and empty eyes. Perhaps most disturbing of all are the reports from those who have encountered the Andersons on their travel. Waitresses, hotel clerks, and gas station attendants all tell the same story of a haggard couple accompanied by twin shadows, visible only from the corner of one's eye, and behind them, a taller, thinner shadow, its arms wrapped protectively, or perhaps possessively, around them all. The original drawing that started it all now hangs in a locked vault at the local university's Paranormal Research Department. But even behind inches of steel and layers of protective wards, researchers swear the spindly figure in the background seems to grow larger with each passing year. Some claim that if you look at the drawing long enough, the figure's head begins to turn, its crack-like smile widening as it looks directly at you. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our journey through these disturbing children's drawings. 3 families forever changed by the power of imagination, or perhaps by something far more sinister. The Johnsons, haunted by the memory of Emily, and the ever-watching smiling man. The town of Millbrook, forever in the shadow of a playground that shouldn't exist. And the Andersons, endlessly searching for children who may no longer be entirely of this world. As you tuck your children in tonight, take a closer look at the drawings on their wall. Are the figures in the background just scribbles and smudges, or is something looking back at you, growing stronger with each glance, feeding on your unease? Remember, the line between fantasy and reality is often thinner than we'd like to believe. In the innocent scrawls of a child's crayon, entire worlds can be born, or horrors beyond imagination can find their way into ours. Sweet dreams, dear listener, if you dare to sleep at all. And perhaps leave the lights on tonight. You never know what might be hiding in the shadows, waiting for you to close your eye.